All right. So let's see. So for anyone who's not familiar, we're here with Brian Nichols, host of the Brian Nichols Show and associate editor at the Libertarian Republic. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
How is it working at the Libertarian Republic?
I mean, it's not like a quote unquote job. It's more of just really a group of great people getting together and trying to promote. In this case, it's one common publication that is an article every day or so that comes out talking about not just one article, but many articles talking about a libertarian perspective on the news. Unfortunately, when you look at the mainstream media that's out there, there's no real voices that are out there for libertarians besides Reason and a few others. So, Austin Peterson has the Libertarian Republic, and it was great to number one, be an associate editor, so focusing on helping with content, but more recently taking on more of a like a social media kind of a role. So it is great opportunities, made a lot of great people, and still a lot of great relationships to this day.
Cool. And before we jump into this, a couple just quick questions about yourself for people that don't know you. How did you come to libertarianism? Was this something like your parents kind of instilled these values?
No, actually, to the contrary. So when my family, when I was growing up, they were actually very Republican in politics. I kind of found libertarianism much like a lot of other people who were expressing today about 2008. And as with one guy who's celebrating his birthday, Ron Paul. Happy birthday, Ron Paul, 85. And it was on 2008. He was on stage against the Republicans in the primaries for the GOP nomination. And at this time, we're 7 years removed from 9/11. And Ron Paul had the stones, the testicular fortitude to stand on stage in front of a neocon GOP and say, listen, they did 9/11 because not because they hate us for our freedoms, but because we've been over there for decades at this point, and we've been leading these interventions in their homes, and we've led to more destabilization in these areas, and we've caused so much pain, suffering, and devastation, and that's the reason they hate us, not because they hate us because of our freedoms. No, we need to look in the mirror, and Ron Paul, that was the bravest thing really that he could say on that stage, and as a kid watching that on TV. There's something about that when you hear the one guy saying something that's completely opposite of everybody else on stage that actually means a little something to you. So that kind of planted the seed. And then down the road, working in politics, kind of got just disappointed in watching the traditional GOP left and right, back and forth, and started to gravitate more towards those liberty warriors in Congress and in the Senate, folks like Justin Amash, Thomas Massey, Rand Paul, and with that, started to watch some more videos and start to watch more of Ron Paul and learning more about him. And with that, I started to drift more into the ideas and concepts of liberty, and that's where I ended up supporting Ron Paul's son Rand on his campaign in 2015. And with that, after getting more involved with Rand dropping out, moving more towards the traditional libertarian politics that I found myself since really 2016 to today in.
Okay. So related to your question there, I had some trouble figuring out how to phrase this, but I'm sure you'll get what I'm trying to get at. So libertarians have seen some limited success in Republican primaries, of course, mainly with Ron Paul and to a lesser extent with his son. If all big L libertarians, Libertarian Party members, participated in Republican primaries, there would be a strong chance of getting a small L libertarian nominated. Should big L libertarians work with the GOP towards that end or not?
It's funny because I just had a Theodore from Crowdfunded Government on my show, and we actually just discussed this very topic. And he brought this as a thought that he had, where he said, his goal was to get all third-party candidates to be a part of the two big parties, and it was more so to exactly the point. Actually have some success in making some change. I think there's definitely merit to the argument, and I definitely empathize with it, and that's why I continue to support folks like Thomas Massey, Rand Paul, Justin Amash, and Justin obviously just switched to the LP. But prior to that, using the GOP as a platform to really promote libertarian or just small L liberty values. So yes, there's definitely a reason that works in terms of especially enacting policy, but from the third party perspective of what's the role of a third party, going back to like 2018, one of my first episodes was actually with Dean Clancy, who is the former VP of FreedomWorks, which is a large nonprofit think tank here in the United States, focused on libertarian and small L liberty values. And one of the questions I asked him was, what's the role of third parties? And really, we came to the conclusion that parties are nothing more than platforms to promote ideas and enact policy. So with the Libertarian Party, at the very least, its role of trying to keep the other two parties honest, it's important to serve as that role. And we're seeing that now in 2020, because you look at the breakdown of American electorate, right? Just over 51% of Americans even voted in the last 2016 presidential election. So you already have a situation where you have basically, a quarter and a quarter of America who are deciding what's ultimately going to happen for the entire country, which is a completely backwards way of thinking, personally, if I were to, state that opinion. But when you consider the fact that going into 2020, now we have a situation where a lot of Americans are looking at Joe Biden and Donald Trump and thinking, it got worse. It went from Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump to Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Like, where is the alternative? Where is the grown-up in the room? And I personally, and obviously this is anecdotally, but I'm seeing more people reach out to me saying, tell me more about this Jo Jorgensen lady. I love to learn more about her. Can you put me to her website, put me to an interview with her? And that right there, I think, speaks to, yes, there's a role for the third parties. And I think I'm not a big fan of, this zero, not zero sum, but like this, all or nothing kind of mentality. I think there's a role for libertarian as a libertarian party, but there's also a role for small L libertarians in the Republican Party, even in some Democratic Party. I mean, hey, if you can show me a person that's going to run as a Democrat and win with liberty ideals, I'm all for it. I don't think it's going to happen, but I would 1,000% support it.
All right, so we'll jump into users' questions. If you don't like any of these questions, you just Waffle, say some stuff. I'll pretend I didn't see it. And then move on. Lil Bill wants to know, what are your thoughts on the TikTok ban, and is there a better way of addressing national security issues without severe consequences on freedom of speech and expression?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first and foremost, I think it's ironic that the United States government is going ahead and banning TikTok for spying on American privacy when we have our own national government who's doing way more than TikTok was. Now, granted, the argument is, well, TikTok is owned or at least strongly influenced by a questionably threatening superpower in China. But I mean, goodness, you look at what Edward Snowden revealed back in the early 2010s, and that just it makes you really take a step back and say, what is our government doing? Why do they need to have all this mass data, this metadata that they're collecting in the terabytes of people? So to not waffle on the question, but to TikTok, I think. And the answer is not to say, well, the market will decide, because that's always what libertarians say, and that's not the right answer. I mean, it comes down to, yes, the market will decide, but it's so much more nuanced than that. And that's why I hate like the bumper sticker libertarian slogans, because when you try to use bumper sticker slogans, whether it's libertarians, Republicans, Democrats, they just fall on deaf ears because people are just so tired of bumper sticker slogans. That's why the news, honestly, is having such a hard time, is because people are rejecting it en masse, and they're looking for those very deep, nuanced conversations like a Joe Rogan. Think what you will about Joe Rogan. Who else is out there that's actually having these conversations with people hours long in some cases? So to the question about TikTok, I think the answer would be that it's important for people to take some personal responsibility, first and foremost. Personal responsibility, I just did an episode here in the Brian Nichols Show. It's airing tomorrow, actually, with Gary Collins, who wrote the book, The Simple Life. And really the idea of personal responsibility impacting really everything as it pertains to not only your individual instances of experiences in your life, but also how different policies are going to be enacted on your life based on you either taking responsibility or not taking responsibility. For example, if you're not taking responsibility in your healthcare, and you're seeing right now in America, we have the most money spent on healthcare, yet we have some of the highest instances of obesity-related illnesses. And it's like, okay, well, where's the disconnect happening, right? So what do we do? I think it's important for Americans to take a step back and start to really think about what they're putting on the internet, personal information, what apps you're downloading on your phones. Are they safe? But also, I think it's important to, yes, encourage alternatives out there. And I think it's important to not just look at the government to be the arbitrator of what's good and what's bad. Because as soon as you start to do that, right, in the name of national security, that opens Pandora's box. And we've seen what happens when the government is in this case not telling you what they're doing behind the scenes. Just imagine what they'll do when they can start to use these precedents of saying it's for national security and they're doing it in the open. Then what are they doing behind the scenes? It's going to be even scarier. So I hope that answered the question. I know it's a tough topic to talk about because, I mean, it really is. I think you are going to see innovations that will take place that will make a lot of the issues with the TikTok become obsolete. You know, something. And I speak from a guy who works in telecom, my day job, right? And I talk to engineers all day long, and the innovations that they're coming up with is great, and it's awe-inspiring to hear behind the scenes. I'm sure that there's going to be something that's developed that will help mitigate privacy concerns. You know, for example, on my show, I had a gentleman named Jeremy Kaufman from Library.io, which is basically just an open source solution to like YouTube, right? If you put a YouTube video on YouTube, YouTube can take it down without, you know, any reason for it, indiscriminately just say, hey, you're done. Whereas on Library.io, you as the user of the video, it cannot be taken down unless it's violating the law, right? So I think once we start to encourage more of those solutions and then start to support them with our dollars, we'll actually see a big change. But I don't think it's a good idea for us to look to the government to be the answer, you know, in terms of protecting us from an app on our phones.
All right. Next question. So before we get into it, I know there's a lot of new people that hopped in the chat. First, if you guys don't know, we're talking with Brian Nichols here, host of the Brian Nichols Show and associate editor at the Libertarian Republic. If you guys would like to ask a question, right above this voice chat, the Brian Nichols AMA, you can write your question. If you'd like to ask the question yourself, write in all caps VC before your question. Next one we have is from Jack. He wants to know, how do we go about implementing libertarianism?
How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Literally, though, that's how it's going to have to be. And I think it's foolish for libertarians to think that we are ever going to have, and I'm assuming, no, he's a libertarian asking this. I think it's foolish for us to think that we can do a top-down libertarian approach, partly because that's not how libertarianism really works. You look at the ideas of liberty, right? And who in libertarianism is the most important person? It's you, the individual. You are the most important. You are the most, you're the smallest minority out there, you, the individual. So in that, we want to make sure we're empowering the individual, but as you're empowering the individual, that individual then can empower their communities. So as libertarians, I think the best way to actually enact libertarian ideals is to start in your communities and to start living the principles and showing the values to your average everyday, you know, mom and pop shop, your friendly, you know, neighborhood, you know, churchgoer, whatever it may be that you find yourself engaging in your community. Live the principles, live the values, and then as you start to, you know, build cred in your community, run for office. Go for it. Run as a libertarian, and then instead of just being the crazy guy who's running for libertarian with a boot in his head, and I'm not saying it to be mean to our dear friend, but still, at the same point in time, Vermin knows like that's the character he's playing, right? But when you see your average person out there and they see the boot in the head, they probably get turned off. But they see you, you know, they see Bill, the business owner who, you know, they've known for 5 years, and they're like, hey, Bill's a libertarian. I don't know what that is, but I know Bill. Bill's pretty cool. I know Bill, you know, he takes care of his family, he takes care of his community. I know that he runs a good business, and I've never had any issues with Bill. So, you know, hey, maybe I'll go ahead and give Bill, the libertarian, a vote. And I think that's going to be the way we actually build some credibility. Because here's the sad reality, right? When folks are looking for electoral politics at a national level, they're looking for a resume. And unfortunately, that resume has been built in their minds to have to be some political office on there, right? So you're looking for your former governors, your senators, your congresspeople. And unfortunately, we have none of those right now in libertarian politics. I mean, we have Justin Amash and we have a few, you know, state positions and mostly local positions, right? So otherwise, it's tough for us to say we have quote unquote credible candidates. I mean, that's why 2016 it was such a chance really to have two-term governors. The problem is that they weren't really, you know, promoting a libertarian idea. But we'll have that conversation at a different day. But to really answer the question, it comes first and foremost, looking at your local environments, making sure that you're doing the best version of whatever it is you think libertarianism is in your home area, and show the value to people, build that credibility, and then that's when you can start to have some electoral success, not only in your local communities, but beyond that, state, and then one day federal. We'll get there though.
All right. Next question comes from Roritan. He wrote that he has a favorite question about Ibn Khaldun's definition of government. Uh, let's see. So Ibn Khaldun's definition was that the government is an institution which prevents injustice except as it commits itself. Roritan wants to know, do you think this can justify the presence of a government, and do you think this is accurate to America?
Interesting. I like that question. Let me think about this for a second. So I think when you look at government, especially in an American sense, it's tough because we've kind of given this personification to government of this like some pseudo morality. But to the quote, I think if we were to base government on that, right, that would be at least be a starting off point, because then you could justify the reason the government is doing what it's doing. But there is no justification for what government is doing what it's doing now, because what happens is you have electoral politics where politicians are running on one issue and then they completely do the opposite once they get into DC, because really at the end of the day, they don't need the votes. They need the money. They need the money from the corporate, the corporate cronies that really they've been able to buy out. So I'm not sure if I'm answering the question. Am I hitting somewhere in the ballpark what you guys are looking for an answer?
I think it's around the ballpark. I mean, just to kind of rephrase it a little bit. Actually, no, I don't think I can do that justice. Roritan, do you feel like he's answering your question?
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
I think part of what he was writing about is like, this is perhaps the initial purpose of a government, is to kind of bring kind of justice to the people and prevent bad shit happening to them, but in the process of doing it, it does bad shit itself.
100%. And as I say, if so right there, it 100% does bad shit itself. And the problem is that government is nothing but a never-ending case study of unintended consequences, right? I mean, I have so many friends and family who are in government in some way, shape, or form. Here's a fun fact for you, right? Of the top 5 occupations for people who download my show and the greater podcast and the We Are Libertarians networks, you know what they all are? They're all public sector jobs. How crazy is that? That here we have public sector employees listening to libertarian podcasts, but here's the truth. They experience how inefficient and messed up government is at a core fundamental level because they're in it every single day. And the part that drives me crazy is that too many libertarians will approach these folks who are in the public sector and they'll treat them like they're the bad guy. I'm like, stop. They're not the bad guy. They're in the system because they were told when they were going through their education their schooling system, shall we call it, in America. And they were told that, when you want to do good in life, you go to the government and you do good through government. And the problem is that when they get into government, they realize, oh shit, we can't do good in government because the government from its core has been completely rotten. And that's inherently the problem with governments, because they incentivize bureaucracy. And then when you have all these good intentioned people going in saying, here, you want to look at a case today, it's perfect of unintended consequences. California, they go ahead and they're going to go ahead and make it so Uber and Lyft have to make all their employees actual employees. They're, instead of being contract workers, they want to make sure they can get them health insurance and they can go ahead and get them their benefits and such. Uber and Lyft are companies. They are not governments. They do not have the magic money tree that the government does. The government actually does have a magic money tree in the Fed, right? Your private companies, they don't have magic money trees. So when you have the government start to arbitrarily set artificial expenditures for these companies, they're saying, I'm sorry, we cannot do that. So in a feel-good attempt by politicians in California to give people health care and benefits, now Uber and Lyft are saying, not only can we not do that, but since we can't meet these new stupid standards you're setting, we are now moving all of our operations out of the state of California. Hundreds of thousands of jobs lost. Why? Because of unintended consequences. And that right there is the prime example of why, instead of thinking that government is going to be some moral do-good entity, we see firsthand it does much more harm than good. And instead of letting people think that they can do better in government, we need to start incentivizing people and encouraging people to start doing these things through the private sector, because the private sector, you're responsible to the person, your customer. In government, they have a monopoly on violence. Who are they responsible to? No, they have the guns. Like, they shoot somebody, who are they going to get in trouble with, right? Like, you shoot somebody, you're going to go into a cage for the rest of your life. So that's the difference. That's why government fundamentally, though, at its core is flawed. I sound like an anarchist, don't I?
You do.
All the ANCAPs right now are all, they're all, like clapping in agreement, but they know, then they listen to my show and they're like, oh, he's a pragmatist too. So I actually believe that we have to like do this in like a phased approach, because the reality is nobody is going to go from point A to point Z overnight. It's not going to happen. And as soon as you tell people that you're going to do that, they're going to like, nope. They don't see the middle ground, right? People want to see how you're going to get from point A to point Z. And if you're just going to say, listen, I read a lot of books, I know the principles, trust me on this, okay? They're not going to buy it. And then they will not give you their vote. They will not trust you. And until they're going to vote for you, they have to trust you. So you have to build that trust. And how do you build that trust? You have to show you actually care, ask them questions, learn. This is, honestly, this is sales 101. You have to learn what you have to have the conversation that they're having in their head already. That is the primary goal of a salesperson. And if you're not doing that in politics, then you have instantly lost the person you're trying to convince. So, I see this a lot on the right, and I see it a lot on the left. You are not going to convince somebody by saying, you're wrong and I'm right, here's why. You are going to lose them at the start. You have to ask them, why do you think that? You have to set some common ground, some fundamental basic understanding of where the other person's coming from. You have to empathize. You have to understand what life experiences they had to have led them to believe what they believe. And until you get there, then you're just going to be, fighting an uphill battle, because if you're not agreeing to the basic terms of a conversation, then what the hell is the point of the conversation? If not to just feel that you are right and they are wrong, that you have won and they have lost.
So
mic drop.
No. So a lot of times, when we talk to Marxists or communists, especially amongst each other, one of the things they always say is read theory. I'm curious, as a libertarian, one, how important is it to you that people read theory, and two, who should they be reading?
So theory is good to an extent. It's important to have the basic fundamental understandings of things, right? So who should they read? Mises, Rothbard. I would even say Milton Friedman, Henry Hazlitt, Hayek. And if you want to do some more contemporary stuff, listen to people like Tom Woods, Bob Murphy, Gene Epstein. There are so many folks that you can listen to, but I'm going to get people mad. It's not everything. Reading, it's important to know it, but it's important to know it so you are more concrete in your beliefs, and you can rationalize why you believe what you believe. However, that only goes to an extent, because to the point I was just making before, it doesn't matter how many books you've read, because at the end of the day, if you can't convey what you've read to a person who has never read the book, number one, but number two, has no frame of reference from where you're coming from, then what good is it? Does it? Yeah, you can sit there and say, like, listen, I am king libertarian. I've read all the books. I know all the theology. I know everything to know about libertarianism. But if you can't convince anybody that your idea, not only is it morally correct, but it would actually work, what good is it? What have you accomplished genuinely? And if there's anybody out there who thinks that they've accomplished something, I'd love to hear a counter to that, because if the goal is to actually advance liberty, which I fundamentally believe that is what our goal as liberty warriors, if you will, should be, is to try to get more people to at least hear our messages, then I don't think just feeling that we're right all the time is the way to accomplish that.
All right. Next question I love. Very similar. It's from Breezy. He wants to know, why is left-wing libertarianism considered not real libertarianism to many?
So I guess it depends on what we define as left-winged libertarianism. Is Breezy here to clarify really quick? If not,
I don't know if he.
If not, no worries, because I'll do my best to. So I'll kind of give a definition of what we usually hear as left libertarians, and I say that because in libertarian politics, you see a lot of people who came to libertarian movement through the likes of like a Ron Paul, right? And that's going to be more of the GOP route. And then there's some folks who came in it more from, they were either Democrats or they were kind of hippie socialist mentality, and they don't trust government. They have a natural aversion to authority, which is good. But then they have this this empathetic mentality that it goes past empathy and it goes into action, and instead of personal action, using government to enact said morals, if you will. So the problem is with a lot of left-winged libertarians is that it's a definition of rights. So you have a lot of what's called positive and negative rights. And really it's what do you require of someone else in order to enact a right, right? So I have the right, the freedom of speech, right? That freedom of speech does not require you, probably Tim, to do anything different. But healthcare, if you were to say I have a right to healthcare, that right to healthcare now comes with an understanding that healthcare has to be performed as a service, and that service has to be done by a person, right? So if that's the case, then that right requiring the labor of another person is no longer a right. And that right there, I think, would be a fundamental difference between a lot of left and right libertarians, is where we have the definition of rights, but also in terms of the cultural issue. You hear a lot of left libertarians have been lumped in on the cultural perspective. And it's actually kind of sad. I have, at our big channel, We Are Libertarians, Chris Spangle. He is on a national podcast called The Pat Down with Miss Pat. Miss Pat is a very prominent stand-up comedian, and she and him have great conversations, and she brings forth her experience as an African-American woman in Atlanta and now living in very rural Indiana, and Chris being a ginger white guy, and to have their different life experiences and have that conversation. But unfortunately, some libertarians look at that conversation of a cultural perspective as something that's not, it's not libertarian. Once you get into looking at the differences of groups of people, that's where like they start to throw in this left libertarian mentality. But it is important, going to, again, full circle to what we were talking about a couple of questions back, is to understand where people are coming from with their life experiences. If Chris were to go to Mrs. Pat's show and say to her, here's what you need to know about libertarianism and how it's going to help you, and here's why I'm right. Instead of saying, hey, Miss Pat, talk to me about what issues are really important to you, and then learning it's healthcare and criminal justice reform. Well, now, instead of saying, here's all the things, here's free, here we're talking about free market and cutting taxes and all that kind of stuff. She doesn't care about that. She cares about healthcare, keeping people in her family healthy, and criminal justice reform, making sure they're not getting shot indiscriminately in the streets by rogue cops who don't have to worry about qualified immunity protections, right? Or making sure that people aren't getting locked away for smoking a plant, right? So you have that conversation. That's different because now you're approaching that person on a human basis. And that is I think, unfortunately, what has been labeled as left libertarian. So I think it's important to understand the differences, but to understand also that just because somebody is approaching something from more of an empathetic perspective, it doesn't mean that the principles are compromised. It means that you're trying to understand where the person's coming from so you can better sell what it is that we have as a solution to them as the person, because until they as the person accept it, what do we think we're going to accomplish with them trying to promote it themselves? That make sense?
Yeah, just to, I guess, refine this, because I saw this question going a little bit of a different way. There are people who are, for example, libertarian socialists. I think Noam Chomsky identifies as one, for example. And I think another one, actually, I don't know if you're familiar with him, Vosh is one. Do you consider people like that, libertarian socialists, to be libertarian? And if not, why not?
So again, it would go more to what do we see the role of rights being, right? And again, and I know I hate to go back to that, but I think definitions matter, right? When you go to somebody like a Noam Chomsky, I think they would be on board with curtailing the service state, bringing us out of these foreign wars. But from a very social perspective, they're much on the mindset of giving away these services as rights. And I think from a fundamental disagreement of terms, I can't jump on board with that as being a true like libertarian perspective, because it's fundamentally not, just based on the definition of those terms. However, I would 1,000% look at somebody like a Noam Chomsky as an ally on those topics of where we have agreement. So Noam Chomsky, if him and I want to go and have a conversation about our interventions overseas and how the United States has been our own worst enemy, 1,000 times over, I will have that conversation. But in terms of, are we going to give healthcare to everybody because it's a human right? I'm sorry, no. I'm all for getting healthcare to as many people as we can, as cost effectively as we can, and as best quality as we can. I just fundamentally disagree with the fact that government, number one, can be the means to accomplish that, but number two, that it's something that government should be putting as codifying as a right. Because here we have to acknowledge the elephant in the room. Every law that is passed at the end of the day is enforced at the end, the threat of force from a gun, right? Every law. So if you codify healthcare as a right, right? And now remember, the thing you have to remember is any law you pass is going to be used at some point in time in the future by your worst nightmare of a person, whether that's Donald Trump, who quote unquote is literally Hitler, or literally Hitler, right? So think of your scariest, your scariest person leading the country and now using the laws that you've passed in the way they see fit. Comfortable with that? I know a lot of libertarians right now are looking at Trump because he's just such a bull in the china shop and what he's doing to the federal government, and just it's falling apart. And they're like, yes, burn, like let it burn. But I mean, a lot of Republicans would be more like establishment. A lot of Democrats too are looking at this like, oh my God, what is he doing? And I'm like, exactly. Scary, isn't it? Like what's happening to the post office? That one entity can impact the mail of everybody. Like maybe we should change that, right? So it's not one entity that's impacting the mail delivery for everybody. So I think, did that answer your question? I know I went on a tangent there, but did that answer the basics of the question?
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
So next question comes from Edgy. Edgy, you go ahead and ask your question.
All right. Whose base do you think Jo Jorgensen's base overlaps with the most, Trump's or Biden's? And then a follow-up question: how would you like Joe Biden as president?
How would I like Joe Biden? We'll cover that one in a second. But so Jo Jorgensen's base, honestly, the base for Joe, I'm not giving a bullshit answer, I swear. I think it's about split. And I say that because anecdotally, I have been speaking to a lot of friends and a lot of family who are coming at a mix of the left and the right. And they're asking me, Jo Jorgensen, tell me more about her. And it kind of catches me off guard, because when you're getting asked that question by someone who's on the left, you have to approach it differently than somebody on the right. And going back to what we were just talking about, you have it's kind of like a mental like exhaustion game, because like you're trying to you keep up. Like here's Joe for the left and here's Joe for the right. Like these are the things that we can all agree on, come this way for this election. Let's get this lady into office, right? So I think there's no specific person that she's pulling more from, but I'll kind of go ahead and say I think she's definitely reaching more people, though, who have not considered voting. So back at last election cycle, it was like some stupid number. It was like 48%, I think, of people didn't vote. Like just straight up didn't vote. It was like 100+ million people. That's insane. But I think a lot of those people are starting, and I actually just discussed this with I think it was actually either Gary Collins or Ricky Dale Harrington. He's running for U.S. Senate out in Arkansas against Tom Cotton. Actually, there's no Democrat out there too, folks. So if you're a Democrat looking for somebody against Tom Cotton, go to look at Ricky. But we were discussing, if you were to look at this quote unquote silent majority that Trump always talks about, I don't think it's really his silent majority that he's referring to. The silent majority is actually the people out there who live the principles, don't hurt people, don't take people's stuff, and they're just tired. They're usually politically apathetic, and every 4 years they have to sit and just kind of pay attention to the teams playing, and a lot of times they just don't partake because they're like, my vote doesn't matter. Why waste my time? And I think we're seeing a lot of people right now who are like, this is stupid. Like I'm tired of this, this red versus blue, and like it's getting to the point it's starting to like impact your daily lives, and people are starting to grow tired of that. So that group of people, right, that I consider the real silent majority, I think those folks are going to come to the ballot box in mass this year. I could be wrong, and I might be wrong. And if I'm wrong, I'll be the first one to eat crow. But I think we're going to see more people say, this is enough of this. Like I'm voting for the adult in the room. So I think we might actually see Jo Jorgensen have a higher percent of votes than Gary Johnson. Am I confident in that prediction? Absolutely not. But I think it'd be great to see. Now, to follow up question, Joe Biden as president, it's not going to be as bad as people think. It will be Obama 2.0 with much more cultural ramifications. But when we look at what happens to the GOP when there's a Democrat in office, look no further than 2010, where we got folks like Thomas Massie, Rand Paul, Justin Amash, Ted Cruz, and then at the time they were decent, like Marco Rubio. But that was entirely inspired, that Tea Party revolution and that idea of basically libertarian, like small L libertarianism in the GOP was inspired by somebody like Obama. So Biden, I think we might see a return to some of that, but what we're going to see if Biden wins is a big battle of the GOP. It's going to be a battle between the more small L libertarians like the Thomas Masseys and the Rand Pauls, but then there's going to be those populist populist folks like Tom Cotton and the Tucker Carlsons of the world, the Josh Hawleys. Like that's going to be the other wing, and that's what I'm really curious to see what's going to happen if you end up seeing a GOP that's much more aligned with Rand Paul. I think the Libertarian Party will see a reduction in size and more libertarians go back to our first question. They go towards the GOP as that option, right? Whereas to the contrary, if it's the Tucker Carlson, Hawley, Tom Cotton wing, I think you're going to see a mass migration of libertarian leaning candidates from the GOP to a third party. And I think that would be the Libertarian Party. Reason being, ballot access, man, it's a bitch. And Kanye is going to learn that firsthand. It is impossible to just say you're going to get ballot access in 4 years. The Libertarian Party has been doing this for 50 years almost, guys. And we are still fighting. I mean, we just got approval in Tennessee for being on the ballot there. And in Pennsylvania a couple weeks ago, same thing. So we still have to fight uphill battles as a third party. And that goes into ballot access laws are just absolutely ridiculous. And it speaks to more just institutionalized duopoly nonsense. But yeah, I think Joe Biden as president, it wouldn't be as bad as people think. I think we would see a GOP kind of revert to this fiscal conservatism or this populist mentality. And regardless of what they do, I think you're going to see the Democrats have to moderate some. If they don't, you're going to see the louder voices, the Ilhan Omars, the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Rashida Tlaibs, they will become the leaders of the Democratic Party. And I think if that's the case, they're going to alienate a lot more people too. And then that middle group that we were talking about earlier, I think you would quickly see them start to coalesce around this is stupid party. And Libertarian Party has the great chance to be the this is stupid party, but that requires a Libertarian Party to take itself seriously. So I'm hoping that we will get somewhere there, and fingers crossed it will be here in 2020.
All right. Next question comes from Jameson. He wants to know, should landlords and business owners be able to discriminate on the basis of race, religion, or sexuality?
Bake the cake! I love it. Thank you for asking a bake the cake question, Jameson. The answer to the question, yes, absolutely. Anyone should be able to discriminate for any reason, because at the end of the day, I don't think that I would want to do business with somebody who's going to be discriminating otherwise behind the scenes and I don't know about it, right? Like, let me ask you this, right? Would you willingly go to a business owner who is racist and is blatantly being racist in actions in their personal lives, but do nothing in their daily lives to show it as they're running their business, right? So you go in, you've been giving them money every single month, completely unaware, because you're like, hey, I have no idea. But if you allow them to be the open discriminatory folks they are, number one, I think sunshine's the best type of disinfectant. But number two, now I will not frequent that establishment with my dollars. So I think that having people be discriminatory actually gives us a chance as very educated consumers. Because let's be real, if somebody was being discriminatory based on the sex, their religion, ethnicity, or sexuality, I can guarantee you it's going to be on the top trending in Twitter, and there will be people with signs outside that business. They'll be boycotting them one way or another, and you can't get away with it nowadays. So I would 1,000% be much more for a world where that's out in the open and we can call it for what it is, instead of having people behind the scenes have this hidden these hidden biases that they keep to themselves. It's just like why would you want to engage in commerce with somebody like that? I would much rather want to know, right? I mean, I would challenge anybody to say that they would much rather give their money to a racist behind the scenes just because in law that person can't be discriminatory. I think it's silly.
All right. Next question. Oxygen and its robot wanted to know, what do you think of Donald Trump?
What do I think of Donald Trump? Donald Trump is he is Donald Trump. And honestly, that's at the end of the day, that's all he's ever really been, and that's all he'll ever be. He is Trump. And I say that because Trump is nothing more than a name. He has built up entirely based on this pomp and circumstance, this career, this life, and really we're seeing it firsthand is that it requires you as a person to have some substance. I'm not questioning, the dude's a billionaire. Like he obviously did some stuff right? But at the end of the day, we're seeing firsthand when you're asked tough questions, it's important to be able to have principles to refer back to, because principles don't waver based on whatever the political winds are blowing in whatever direction. Your principles are important because they are the basis for what you're doing, not only in your personal actions in your life, but also when you're enacting policy, because your policy actions, this is the thing too, why personal responsibility is so important. When people are running for office and they think that they can put other people's interests in better situations than that individual person can, but that person themselves, as the elected official, doesn't have their shit in order, I mean, what do you think is going to happen? And obviously, you look across the United States right now, we're seeing this in mass, and it's sad because it's entirely avoidable. If we just said maybe we shouldn't have so many people, so many people leading the other people. Maybe we should get back to a mentality of people leading themselves.
All right. Next question comes from Jordan. He wants to know, what is your response to the 2008 recession? Do you believe this was due to not enough regulation, or should there be less?
Oh, there should absolutely be less regulation. So the housing crisis was 1,000% caused because of government regulation. You have a situation where banks, not only were they encouraged, but in some cases they were required to give out loans to people who were entirely unprepared for said loans, because it was done as a feel-good measure by government to say, well, shouldn't people have houses? Shouldn't people be able to afford these nice houses? Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Government Politician, as a bank, we can't really loan out this money because they're not that qualified. I don't care. I'm sorry. I'm telling you how to do your business. Give these people loans for houses. And that's what happened. So banks were like, all right. And what happens if we, have these people default on their mortgages? We'll bail you out. Okay, here we go. So now you have a situation where not only were these companies forced basically to give these mortgages, but now they're being backed from any possible ramifications or consequences of their actions in terms of an economic sense. So now there is no risk in factor or in play here. So you have a situation where banks are making completely ridiculous mortgages for people who could not pay them off at all. The banks had no worries about losing money because they knew that the banks were going to have that money fronted by the government. So at the end of the day, it was entirely due to the overregulation. So I think here we'll go back to a fundamental thing when it comes to libertarians, and I'm talking about looking at these issues real time, right? It's very easy to say, well, at the time, shouldn't we have done X? And I say, okay, well, if you're a doctor and you're in the ER and the person comes in and their arm is cut off and it's bleeding, you're going to say, we need to triage the wound, right? Okay, great. But if you find out that the person has cancer, you're not just going to say that the arm being cut off solved the cancer. You're going to want to go to the root cause of that cancer and take care of the cancer. And the cancer in this case was the overregulation in the housing market in the first place that led to the ultimate increase of the housing market bubble that led to the inevitable crash. So it's a matter of looking at what actually is the cause versus just being a symptom, right, of the disease. So instead of trying to always fix the symptoms, we need to start asking, how did we end up getting to where we got? So I hope that answered the question, but it just, yeah, it's way too easy to say, well, regulation would have solved it. It's like, okay, so more government is going to solve the problem that was caused by more government. I'm sorry, it just doesn't make sense.
So didn't corporate greed play a large role in this?
Corporate greed? Absolutely. Corporate greed that was incentivized and supported by and financed by what? Government, making sure that they were there as the fail-safe. So here's the thing. It's easy to say corporate greed. The corporations got greedy and they were able to get all this stuff. Yeah. And how were they able to do it? They were able to do it because they knew that there was no market consequences. If you are a corporation, or let's use this as a prime example. If you are a bank and you are giving out these massive mortgages to people who cannot pay them, and you did not have a system where that mortgage you were paying out was going to be covered by a bailout from the government, your bank would go out of business, as it should, because that is how the market works. If your company makes stupid decisions and ends up trying to screw people over, guess what? It will impact the overall ability for that company to have a positive bottom line. People leave those companies. I mean, MySpace was the jam, right? For like 5 years, and then all of a sudden Facebook comes over and completely takes over. But MySpace was the quote unquote monopoly at that time, led by Tom, our nice greedy. Was Tom greedy? I don't think he was a greedy corporation at that time. But regardless, right? It's important for us to at least acknowledge that in a real free market, those greedy corporate interests, they wouldn't be funded by government bailouts. That wouldn't exist, because that is a fundamental opposite example of what capitalism is. Capitalism is the absence of government in the marketplace, whereas corporatism requires government in the marketplace.
All right, so this should be spicy. We've got a response from Jameson. Well, it's a follow-up question, really. He's noting that Cracker Barrel had a 2004 discrimination lawsuit and their business didn't take a hit. Ben & Jerry's sells ice cream in Jewish-only settlements in occupied West Bank, and their business is doing great. Why do you believe people will boycott places that discriminate when there are many examples of big businesses flourishing despite discriminating and other human rights violations? I assume he means...
It's a great question.
Go ahead.
It's a great question, and honestly, I think a lot of it comes to a lot of people's brand loyalty, which is unfortunate. And here, let's kind of expand upon this, Jameson. Right? You look at countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia; they perform tons of human rights violations, and yet there's people who will still support the Iran nuclear deal or still support the Saudi Arabian regime despite the atrocities they do. So I think at the end of the day, the problem is a lot of people, they live in constant states of like this constant, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like, what's the term when you know what you're believing is counter to what you are saying? Help me out.
Are you thinking cognitive dissonance?
Thank you. Cognitive dissonance. Yes. We have a society that literally is just filled with cognitive dissonance. So to your point, Jameson, now, yes, 2004, obviously it's not in the era of Twitter, social media, real-time, instant gratification, social media channels. But I think when you have a situation where more and more options in free speech start to rise up, you'll see more and more options more and more instances like what he listed here start to go away, partly because more people are aware. Now let's take a real example here today. So we're recording here on August 20th. Are you guys familiar with Cuties on Netflix? This whole debacle wasn't going on. So if not, Cuties it was a Netflix show that was supposed to be a launch, and it was about an 11-year-old girl who joins like a 11-year-old girl twerk dance group, and it was like a hyper-sexualized poster for it, and like Netflix had to respond. So there was a push by people that were like Netflix subscribers saying, this is wrong, time out, hold the phone, and Netflix had to respond. That would never have happened in 2000, right? Because it would have been maybe some letters that were sent to the business. It would have been entirely a different kind of situation, because it wouldn't have been known unless it was taken up by the news channel, right? So now those kind of instances, they're not as easy to sweep under the rug. And I mean, just today we saw this is a day and a half of this being in the news, and it's already had a response from Netflix. So like, I think it's a little naive to say that as things change, that we can't change our approach to the solutions just because the technology changes with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So next question. Breezy wants to know, should libertarians follow on Hans Hermann Hoppe's critique of libertarianism?
Can we specify his critique of libertarianism? Because he had quite a few critiques.
Yeah, he writes that Hoppe concluded that the libertarian view of property rights is the only justifiable one, and anyone who denied the libertarian doctrine would be unable to consistently justify his theory.
So the question is Hoppe the only way for libertarianism? I want to make sure I'm answering the question correctly. I'm sorry.
Yeah, he says no. 1 second. He's typing. He's not able to talk right now.
No worries. And I'm sorry for being a pain in the butt. I just want to make sure it's tough. So my day job, like I said, is in sales. And I think it's important to always make sure that when you hear an objection or you hear like a counter to something, that you really pin down on it. Because if I start answering the objection entirely wrong, I'm white noise at that point. So that's why I'm trying to make sure I'm being a stickler here and getting it right down.
Well, we can come back to that while he's working on that. Another question we've got here. Let's see. Where was this? Actually, God wants to know, if you had to pick a country that most closely aligns to your ideal America, what would it be?
My ideal America. It has to be real. I mean, it's tough. I would say maybe Switzerland. I mean, Switzerland's the easy one though, right? Because everybody's like, oh, free and neutral and strong and armed. But like, there's stuff about Switzerland though is pretty legit. I have a good buddy of mine who actually he's an economist, and he's gonna be moving at some point. Likely, it's on there to Switzerland, and partly because he's an Austrian economist, and he's a big fan of some of their approach to I don't know the specificities. We actually talked about it one night when we were far too inebriated, and he went on, and I learned so much that I completely forgot. But at the same point in time, I know that there was something along the lines of the way that they approach their public funding. It was almost like a voluntary-ish solution, I believe. And I could be talking out my ass right now, but based on that very drunken night and listening to my friend have that great conversation, and he really had me convinced, I'm going to say Switzerland.
Okay. And you asked if it has to be a real one. What if you could include a fake one?
A fake one. Okay. So if I had to include a fake libertarian society, so maybe not a libertarian society, but maybe, okay, I'm going to make this my own question. I'm sorry, because this is how my brain works sometimes. So I'm making this the question I want it to be. The most libertarian on accident story was the original Star Wars, the 6 movies originally. That was like one of the most accidental libertarian stories, just because it talked about, the idea of giving government all these arbitrary powers, these emergency powers, and this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause. Anakin saying, "If you're not with me, you're my enemy." This this zero sum kind of game way of thinking about life, and just seeing the overturning of the Republic into the Empire, and it speaks to such a libertarian philosophy. It's actually funny. There's a gentleman who has a big YouTube page. I can't say his name because you guys would know him probably, but he does a lot of Star Wars stuff, and he had done a show, and it touched on the libertarian themes in Star Wars. And I actually had a nice email back and forth with him, and he's like, "Hey, listen, like, I appreciate it." I actually had to invite him to my show. He's like, "Unfortunately, like, I just we'll talk about this stuff in passing, but never like really dig into it because they don't want to get into the political fray, unfortunately." Which I think that speaks more to like how sad it is, like our political conversations. Like, and let me just say, like, completely off topic, thank you to the group. So yeah, like, there's a few trolls I saw, but like, that's fine. The fact that almost all of you guys have been, not only engaging, but like actually very respectful. That's one thing I've actually been looking for in my show. So I will do an ask to the audience at some point. If you guys could email me, brian@briannicholsshow.com, because I'm looking for guests that can come on my show and have an intelligent, non-emotional, engaging conversation and fundamentally disagree with me. Because at the end of the day, and I don't know how you guys feel, but I'm tired of talking into echo chambers. And I'm tired of feeling that I'm right in a group of people who also think that they're right. I want to be challenged, and I want to challenge other people because I think that's how we get better. And you look at how our American discourse is right now with Trump versus Biden, and it really it's just two groups of people who can't have a conversation. At the end of the day, that's what it has become. So watching movies like Star Wars, right, and being able to show those libertarian themes, or hell, watching The Incredibles, easily one of my all-time favorite libertarian themed kids movies, because I mean, there's a couple of lines that are great. One, Mr. Incredible, you're talking about Dax, his like new class, or Dash's new class he was going to, but he has to celebrate this little graduation. He's like, they're always looking to celebrate new things of mediocrity. And then there's the one line with Syndrome. He's trying to make everybody superpowers, and he's always, because when everybody's super, nobody will be. And it's like, it speaks to a lot of these libertarian themes, and people get it on a fundamental basis. But then we have to be able to kind of say, hey, what do you think about that? Interesting how they hinted at that, right? So I kind of took that and made it my own. I'm sorry. It's the host in me. But yeah, that's where I went with there.
That's fine. So next question comes from the user Kay. She writes that during the COVID-19 pandemic, which has now claimed 796,000 lives worldwide and 177,000 in the USA, what's your opinion of how Trump has handled the COVID-19 situation, and do you think he should be doing more for the welfare of his country and people?
Great question. So I am probably going to ruffle some feathers here because I think that we did too much. Just going to say it. You look at countries like Sweden, and proportionally Sweden to like the United Kingdom, very similar. Sweden, no lockdown. UK, some of the most massive lockdowns in Europe, and actually they're still putting some more lockdowns back in place right now. Death rates pretty much the same. In terms of not only the death rates increasing, caseloads, they're pretty much the same. You look at states in the United States, the states that did worse objectively, looking at the numbers, are states New York, New Jersey, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and they were states that predominantly sent COVID patients to nursing homes, back to nursing homes. So that was the main cause originally of the deaths in the United States, which is horrifying because they were easily avoidable, number one. Number two, this is something that I have been talking about from the beginning that nobody really wanted to talk about because it was the real elephant in the room, is what is the economic consequences and fallout going to be relative to the pain and suffering that we're feeling right now with COVID. And here's a tough conversation, and I know this is going to be probably a little tough for Kay. I appreciate you have leftists in your name, so I'm saying this. I think this is going to be hard to hear, but you can put dollars to a person's life. And I know this sounds so gross to hear, but we do it every day. Actually, courts do it every day. In court, you will see when there's like a wrongful death settlement, people will put dollar amounts next to how many life years they had left. And that is, I love it. Yikes, oof. No, trust me, it is yikes and oof. But this is what happens in real life. If you have a wrongful death settlement, you will see dollar amounts put to people's names. So with that being said, what's the pain and suffering long term that we're going to see? So right now we're seeing reports from the WHO, which I'm not a big fan of WHO, but saying that we're having, or it was the WHO, it was the UN. They're seeing an average, I think it was like 10 to 50,000 kids starving right now across the world because of the COVID-19 lockdowns. We're seeing right now jobless numbers absolutely skyrocket in the United States. I think last week alone, it was 1.1 million people filed for unemployment. There are long-term, very real consequences that are going to be coming from the COVID-19 lockdown. And it is silly to ignore those long-term consequences. I had economist Dan Mitchell on my show back in April when this was all starting out, and he actually did a paper that looked exactly into that, the economic consequences of COVID-19, and the long-term suffering relative to what we were going to be experiencing. Now you look at states like New York, right? States like New York, it was pretty much a fast burn. I mean, and it's sad, but the reality is people who probably could have passed away from COVID-19 did. And now New York's kind of okay. Like, I'm originally from New York. The state, it's kind of going back to normal. They just said they're going to start opening up gyms again. So you're seeing states start to open back up. And it's not a matter of being, not caring. Like, and this is the part that's so important. Like, here's the reality. You get in your car and you drive to work. You're making a calculated choice. And here's the sad reality. I think some people forget. Every day you are making an economic choice, be that economic choice in your personal life, that economic choice in you're looking at your life, like your chances of survival. I mean, you are always calculating what the risks versus rewards are going to be. And the same thing is true when we're talking about, how we're approaching economic policy and how we're approaching public policy. And, one of the things that kind of struck me, not off guard, because unfortunately, Dr. Fauci, he's kind of been catching me off guard one too many times. And that was, he said that he had never considered what the economic, consequences would be to public policy, that he didn't really think about that when he was asked that by, I forget the representative during the congressional hearing, but he could only speak to the public policy consequences from the virus. It's like, well, shouldn't you kind of be like looking at both? Are we just going to pretend when you're having like 40% of businesses that are going bankrupt right now, small businesses, mom and pop businesses? And here's the thing too, I'd love to ask is, do we want more billionaires like Jeff Bezos to get more money? Is that what we want right now in 2020? Okay. I'm sorry, because that's what's happening when you're having these arbitrary lockdowns. Guess who can foot the bill of all these additional challenges that have been put in place by government, arbitrarily, mind you, by government. And it's these big businesses. It's Amazon, it's Lowe's, it's Home Depot. Guess who's getting hurt? Your local mom and pop shop. They're not going to be able to keep the doors open because they're not going to be able to meet the standards that are set by government. And guess who set those standards? The politicians. And guess who bought up the politicians? That's right, those corporations that we love, right? We love those corporations. Oh, come on. And I think it's important. We have to look at this objectively. And unfortunately, the problem is that emotions are far too high when we talk about politics, especially when we talk about something like COVID-19. You do. I'm sorry, Kay. You do have that in the United Kingdom, and I would encourage you to do some research. And I ask that because in the United States, we're seeing right now firsthand the consequences of what happens when you have states like New York, who is they had rules that you could not go to a bar unless you got a real meal. But chicken wings didn't count as a real meal. You know that? Chicken wings aren't real food. So anyways, to that question, I know COVID-19 is a very hot topic right now, but I think it's important to remove the emotions. And here, I'll finish with this, right? Because I think when we are discussing this, it is important to pay attention to exactly like what the real like numbers are. Right. So here's some numbers that were from a Franklin Covey survey, and it was done here through the end of July. So they polled Americans. They said, if you were to ask people in America, people who are 55 years and older, accounting for COVID deaths, how many do you think it is? They said they thought it was a little over half. The actual number in America, 92% of people over 55 account for the COVID-19 deaths. In America, people believe people aged 44 and younger accounted for 30% of COVID-19 deaths. The actual number of age 44 and younger accounting for COVID-19 deaths, 7.2%. Here's the best one. Americans believe that the total number of COVID-19 deaths from 24 and younger is 8%. The actual number, 0.2. 0.2. How did we get so skewed in those numbers in what the perception is versus the reality? I'll tell you where it came from. It's the media. And if you're getting all your news from the mainstream media, I'm sorry, like, what are you doing? Turn off the mainstream media. Like, get your news from like other places and read from different sources. That's my main pet peeve is when people say that, like, oh yeah, I'm informed. I read Vox every day, or I read Daily Wire every day. Oh, okay, great. You know what you were told to believe. Here's what I like to do. Find an article about something that has it's the same topic, right? So here, let's just do something about Trump, right? Trump did this. Trump punched a baby. Look up the articles from the Daily Wire and Vox, right, about Trump punching the baby, and then look for the lines in the articles that are actually the same. That's the truth. All right. Everything else, it's editorializing, it's fluff. I went on a rant there. I'm sorry, but COVID-19 it's a tough topic, and I think part of it being tough is because we have such an emotional reaction to it because we've been kind of conditioned to be emotional to it. If that makes sense.
All right, so we're at the hour mark. Do you got time for one more question?
Keep going. We can go to 9:30. It's fine.
Okay. So
Having fun.
I was curious what you thought about this one. Not a sprayer wants to know, how will libertarian economic policies cope with increasing automation?
Just the same way that the the milkman was able to keep up. How we were able to see farmers keep up. People change your careers. I mean, so I'm from a very rural area in New York State, and they're still like legit Amish, not the Lancaster PA Amish that are Mennonite, like actual Amish. And the reality is that they still do things in the old ways, right? But like as the times changed, the world changed with it. So careers changed. So like I don't see the mindset that we're going to get stuck in where we are right now. So maybe this is a good analogy. I think this might be one of the main differentiators between the way folks more on like the libertarian side of things look at the world versus maybe folks more on the collectivist side of the world. The world is not a pie that is stuck in one size, right? Like, and that we have to like acknowledge that first and foremost. The pie that is there to share constantly is getting bigger. Like if you were to, and I'll ask this to everybody out there, I know the answer. Would you rather be who you are right now on this Discord server with us in 2020, or would you rather be the most wealthy person in 1460? Right? Not even a question you'd want to be in 2020, because we're talking over the internet all across the freaking world using computers and microphones and electricity and central air, and like, come on, like absolutely you'd want to make sure that you're living in a world where all the basic amenities are covered for. The numbers of people dying in poverty and from diseases is astronomically different from where it was back in the 600 years ago. So it's important to first and foremost acknowledge that as a fundamental reality, that the world is constantly getting more and more opportunity, but also that as jobs change, it opens opportunities for more people to do different things. I mean, my family were generations of farmers, and guess what? We're not anymore. I'm in sales. My dad's an elections commissioner. My mom's in healthcare. That's okay. Like, jobs change, careers change, and change itself isn't bad. Change is a good thing. Change means that like there's innovation happening. There's progress, and progress. I know a lot of libertarians are like, oh, progress. No, progress on its own is a good thing, because that means things are getting better. It means things are getting better. I mean, right now, I would much rather live in a world, regardless of what your opinion is, of Amazon being able to do what Amazon does in helping make lives better than anything then not having Amazon there as an opportunity for people to have a career or to be able to get different services and products, right? So I think that at the end of the day, that's the most important thing to consider, is that really you have to look at the world not as this one fixed pie, but rather it's a pie. It's constantly growing, it's constantly expanding, and that's honestly going to create more opportunity, more more really chances for people to not only exist, but thrive and have better opportunity for not only themselves, but their future generations down the road.
All right. Lil Bill wants to know what your opinion is on Delta Airlines kicking Robert O'Neill, the ex-Navy SEAL, off their flight for taking a selfie without a mask.
I don't have enough information about that particular topic to really give an educated answer. Can you enlighten me a little bit on it? I'm actually, I hadn't heard about this until literally just now.
Well, that's all I know about it. He basically had posted a picture of himself, a selfie, on the plane without wearing a mask, and he was, I guess, kicked off for that.
I mean, so the libertarian answer, I'm saying this as the libertarian answer, Delta has every right to do that. The human answer, it's so stupid. Number one, was he like doing it to like, spite Delta? If he is, then good, kick him off the plane. Like, if he's doing like, ha, F you guys, I'm going to take my picture with my mask off. Like, that's a douche move, right? But like, if he's doing it like in a, hey, I just got on the plane, like taking my picture of my selfie, and then like, you're not allowed to do that, get off the plane, then that's a different conversation. Like, that's a genuine misunderstanding. So again, unfortunately, just as is with everything in life, it needs nuance, it needs context. And I am a big fan, believe it or not, probably, Tim. I'm a big fan of waiting for all the information to get out there before we make an opinion. We saw this with the Covington kids. We saw it with Jussie Smollett. I refuse to have a hot take until we let all the information get out there, because I think people get they look really, really silly when they do that otherwise.
All right. Let's see. Next question, pulling back a bit here. Roriton writes that he doubts you think more government is an option, but he wants to know what kind of different government or less government could help the COVID situation.
A government that governs less is the best, but also a government that governs local. So I would be much more in favor of empowering localities to deal with COVID-19 and to let states deal with it on their own. So honestly, what we've seen in America, and this sounds, again, crass, I wouldn't want to see it change too much more other than just letting each individual state give more autonomy to their localities. Because at the end of the day, and here's the reality, right? Is Alaska going to approach COVID-19 the same as Florida? To that, is Florida going to approach COVID-19 the same as the United Kingdom, or the United Kingdom the same as China? No, because they are not only entirely different cultures, they're entirely different geographic areas. I'm from the middle of nowhere, New York. There's more cows than people. So the idea that I should wear a mask when I'm outside in the middle of nowhere is just absolutely bonkers. But if you're living in the heart of a city where you have a lot of people around you all the time, then yeah, it not only would make sense for you to wear a mask, but it makes sense for everybody else to wear a mask too. So, in terms of what I would do different, I would say right now, encourage localities to get more creative in how they want to approach it, but also don't do lockdowns. I'm sorry. The idea that we are going to completely shut down people's ability to earn money for their livelihoods is barbaric and downright scary, right? Because again, we have to go back to imagine that power being used by the scariest person that you can imagine. They could use it against you arbitrarily. In New Jersey, my neighboring state here, we're seeing this right now with Atlas Gym. They're being taken to court and taken down by Pat Murphy because they're trying to open their gym, which is insane because you have gyms literally next door in New York, which had, I think, 15,000 more deaths than New Jersey, and they're opening their gyms this week. That's how arbitrary these rules are and how dangerous it is to give these rules to people in positions of power in the first place. So I know that's a long answer, but again, it requires a little bit more digging into.
All right. Next question comes from Blob. They want to know, do you believe in equality of outcomes, and if no, why? And what's your proposed better solution to monitor your ideal system so that you can ensure it doesn't oppress people?
So in terms of equality of outcomes, absolutely not. Because nothing in life is ever equal. I mean, not only are we not ever expected to see an equality in outcomes in life, but I don't think it's also fair to say we always have an equality of opportunity. I know that phrase gets used quite a bit. And actually, Dave Smith on the Part of the Problem podcast, he kind of just went to this himself a little bit because we all have different areas that we're starting from. But when it goes back to the idea of rights. When you're implying an equality of opportunity, it implies giving something that's likely taken from somebody else in order to create this position of a fair starting point. I think the best way to approach it would be to give everybody the equal opportunity to not have government get in your way, right? To say everybody has a fair shot, no government trying to interfere whatsoever. Go do your thing. I would all be for that, because then it really does come down to, you being able to better yourself, taking personal responsibility, personal development, and being able to accomplish whatever your goals are in whatever that may be, whether it's to be the best painter, to be, the best artist. And that's also the problem of the equality of outcomes. How can you guarantee that all artists are the same, right? Okay, is Michelangelo equal to that of Picasso? Tell me. No, and that's the problem, is because you can't now it's on you to be the judge to tell me if that's equal or not, right? And that's also the problem, is that with as you start to centralize more and more government, it's expected that the people in government need to have answers, right? Instead of saying, let people who are in the marketplace figure out what works based on creativity, based on experiencing what's happening real time, adapting, overcoming, and reacting to it. And then to the question, I guess it was about the size of government. Was that right?
Sorry, I lost a spot. Oh, I'm sorry. No, it wasn't about the size of government. It was about better ways to monitor if you don't want government to do it. I guess oppression and discrimination.
If I'm taking this question the way I think it's being asked, so I would say the answer would be to get less hands-on of the government, right? So part of that requires people to start taking responsibility in their own lives and creating opportunities that would not have existed in the private sector to answer whatever it is that the government's already doing, right? So if you want to say we need to get rid of food stamps, right? Let's say food stamps, then you need to be a solution in place in the market that would be the answer to, well, then what will people do if they can't get food stamps? You say right here, boom, private sector has an answer. They have great, great fundraising. They have all their money shown exactly where they're going to, so it's not being wasted. This is the A+ organization. Go for it. And then you try that at a locality or a state, and you see if it works small scale. Right. And if it works small scale, try it in other states. If it doesn't work in the other states, figure out why. But at the end of the day, it's getting less out of the hands of government, asking government to do less. I mean, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the Twitter page, A Crime a Day. You should go follow it, because it literally tweets out every single day all these different laws that exist that are out there that you could get a felony for. And in America, it's like, you cross the street on a Tuesday without looking both ways in Arkansas, like something like random like that. It's a felony in these certain areas. And it speaks to just how easy it is to commit a felony, because government has passed so many stupid, not only laws, but regulations. And it's entirely done on purpose, because they got rid of slavery in the 14th Amendment, but they said unless they're in prison, right? So the more people you can put in prison, the less people you have to worry about. And but now when you're a felon, you don't have voting rights either. So guess who can't vote against the people that are making the laws? Funny how that works, huh?
All right. Let's see. Next question. Lil Bill wants to know, what are your thoughts on UBI?
Universal basic income. Oh man. So even Milton Friedman toyed around, and he was more of a Chicago school economist, which is just, it's one step below those crazy Austrians that I associate myself with. But basically the idea that we're going to have government give, name the dollar amount, it completely it misses the point of what, the main problem. Again, going back to what's the cancer causing the cancer in the situation. Giving people $1,000, giving people $5,000, giving people name the dollar amount, it doesn't make a difference, because at the end of the day, the costs that people are going to be paying is all relative to what the money supply is going to be. It's all inflation, guys. Inflation right now is truly the hidden tax that nobody's talking about. We're watching, and this is the scariest number. We put more money into our debt in the month of June than we did in the entire United States history leading up to 1979. It's insane. We did it in a month. And we're watching right now savings literally get evaporated away, because we're seeing an influx of basically helicopter dollars from the Federal Reserve being printed en masse and indiscriminately going into the marketplace. And here's the part that's actually really scary, is that we haven't seen the inflation hit yet. Like and economists are fucking shitting their pants about this, because they're like, we put all this money into the economy to stimulate the economy, and we're not seeing it get stimulated. That means people are taking that money and they're storing it away. So what's going to happen when they all of a sudden decide to all go out at once and start spending that money? You are going to see inflation like crazy. And guess where that money's all going to go? Right back to the top, because people aren't going to be using that money to go do investments. They're going to be using it to pay for bills and to go and buy certain products they need at their homes and stuff. That's going to go right to the Jeff Bezoses, and it's going to go up to the the owners of Walmart and Home Depot. So the idea of a UBI, again, it goes back to unintended consequences. The sentiment behind a UBI is great. The idea is that, yes, you want to make sure you're giving everybody $1,000 or it's $5,000, whatever the number is you want to give them, because they need it to survive, to live. They deserve it, being a citizen. Yeah, that go with that. Until then, you look at what are the likely consequences based on what's happened in the past. And what's that old expression? Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Repeat until we're blue in the face.
Right. I think it goes that those who do not learn from history are bound to repeat it, and those who learn history are bound to watch them repeat it.
See,
It's kind of a fatalist idea. But next question comes from Burke. He wants to know, is democracy a necessity for libertarian ideals in your opinion?
No, absolutely not. Actually, democracy. So I have a love-hate relationship with democracy. Democracy, in theory, is a great idea because democracy, in theory, implies that you are going to get a government that best reflects the will of the people, right? We have a democratic republic in America. We have a democracy, pretty much, a true democracy when we have our local elections. In most cases, I don't think we feel as represented as we'd like in not only in America, but also in our localities, and partly because at the end of the day, a lot of people vote against their best interests, and that goes on both sides of the aisle. So I would say for a libertarian society, democracy in many cases actually can be a thorn in the side, because if you have people who are going ahead and voting against the interests of not only themselves but other people, right? So if three of us are in a room and two of us vote to take the other person's money, that's democracy. Make it right? No. Democracy is just a means to an end, but libertarian ideals at their core are about non-aggression and property rights. So if you're not committing any acts of aggression, if you're respecting and enforcing property rights, then that should be pretty much the ability to start your society right there. You don't need to have voting on whether or not you're able to own your property. Like, if it's your property, it's your property. And as long as you're able to enter into voluntary arrangement with people, go for it, right? There's no reason that you should have to vote to take something away from one of your neighbors. And it's a very messy mentality, and definitely a older way to look at voting. And one thing I'd actually, I hate the old expression, libertarians just want to complain, they never offer solutions. Here's some solutions. I actually had a guest on my show, and he's coming back on the show, Aaron Hamlin from the Centers for Election Science, and he has a theory called approval voting, and it's a great idea, and definitely, it's approval voting, and then there's the idea of ranked choice voting. So there's things you can look into that are alternatives to the traditional, just go ahead and cast your ballot and you have the 50+1% majority over the 49% minority. I just think democracy is a much older, outdated way at looking at governance, and honestly, in the era where we are with all the technology, it's lost its luster. It's not something that we need to be a functioning society anymore.
All right, and Eutychus wants to know, what do you think about the war on drugs?
War on drugs is one of the most destructive, stupid policies that's ever been acted by any government, and it has created criminals, air quotes, out of millions of nonviolent offenders. It has destroyed millions of families, destroyed millions of lives, and I think it should be absolutely 100% not only eliminated day one if we had a libertarian president, but all past drug convictions should be 1,000% retroactively repealed and overturned.
All right, then. Next question. How do you justify capitalism when it allows employers to steal the surplus value of workers' labor?
Well, if they're stealing the surplus value of their labor, then why aren't they self-employed? I'm just going to leave the question there because that's the answer to the question. It's a silly. It's the question itself is missing the point. If your labor is that valuable, then be self-employed and keep the labor 100%. It's possible. And if not, then ask why not, and then maybe you can start to work a little bit backwards.
All right. Next question here. It's Robot wants to know, What side of the Captain America Civil War are you on?
Let's see. So was it Tony Stark who was against the government? If that's the case, then yeah, because I'm pretty sure it was Tony. It was a Captain America Civil War. If it's the one I'm thinking of, I'm fairly certain I'd be on Team Stark, which was the not trusting that the government's going to use all these superpowers to the best of their abilities.
Okay. Next question comes from Lil Bill. He wants to know, does Kamala Harris's actions as Attorney General, like withholding evidence for Kevin Cooper, which nearly led to his execution, holding people beyond their sentence date for forced labor and more, foreshadow a dangerous presidency if Biden steps down?
Oh, absolutely. Kamala Harris. I mean, she is as just vicious as they come because she not only is a political opportunist, but she is willing to go after anybody who gets in her way. Oh, Team Stark was for the government. Uh-oh. Okay, well, I'm Team Captain America then. So, anyways, no, Kamala Harris, she easily was one of the scariest candidates that was on that stage because she will she'll toss anybody under the bus to go after them, and that's the thing that scares me, because if she's president, I would not be surprised at all for her to start going after political opponents more so than Trump has. The problem is that you wouldn't have a media to stand up and voice concerns when that takes place, because unfortunately, the mainstream media in the United States is 1,000% in the pocket of the Democratic establishment. It's sad, but it's the reality of where we are in American politics. So, having her as president and then really having no oversight from a media, man, that's dangerous.
All right, next question. Mike Escape always wants to know, would you rather fight a lion or a cheetah?
A lion or a cheetah? Probably the cheetah, just because I'm a big dude. So I'm 6'5", 260, right? Like, I lift weights. I could probably at least hold my own for maybe like 2 seconds against the cheetah. A lion, I mean, they're big and muscular. I'm pretty sure they take me down like, no time at all. But cheetah, I think I could at least muscle my way for maybe like get into like a rear naked choke for a hot second until rip my arm off. That might be my best bet.
All right, and next question comes from N the Fed. You there?
Yeah, I'm here.
N the Fed?
Oh, and the Fed.
Hello? Oh,
ahead,
can I ask it? My question was, do you think that it would be better to repeal the minimum wage entirely, or just decrease it, or keep it the same?
So I think we need to eliminate it entirely, but I think we need to start a little bit going backwards. The reason being, so whenever you have a minimum wage, right, whatever the minimum wage is going to be, it's already excluding people whoever's skills would be less than whatever that minimum wage was set at. So if I'm a business owner and I say I can hire you at $10 an hour because I know that whatever it is that you're going to be producing will get, I don't know, it will get a product worth $15, and I have overhead of $2. And, on top of that, I have something else for $1. So that means I'm going to get a profit of $1 every time that you make something. So I can pay you that value. If your skill set cannot get you that $2 to $3 to $4 or $5 extra dollars of value for whatever it is you're making, then it right there, if I'm the business owner, I say, I can't hire you because I'm going to be losing money. So instantly I'm looking for people who have either higher qualifications or they have more time invested in whatever it is that they're doing. So you're instantly going to be pushing more and more people out of the job market just by setting these arbitrarily high minimum wages. So who's that going to help? That's going to help the people, that's going to help Susan, who's been in her company for 35 years. And then the company decided to do some downsizing. So Susan gets axed, and she's been doing her job for 35 years. And if I'm a person looking to hire, I'm going to go probably to Susan for her 35 years worth of experience and pay her $15 an hour versus Bill, who just graduated high school 5 weeks ago, and he's looking for $15 an hour as well. So you're instantly pushing people out of the market who otherwise, if you could say, hey, Bill, listen, you're starting out. I haven't had the chance to speak to you yet and really have the chance to, know if you know what we're talking about in terms of our industry. But hey, I'm willing to give you, $7 an hour for you to learn. You can, start out working, shadowing with some people. And as you get more skills, we can increase your pay. And then as he starts to get better and starts to earn more, then he can start to ask for more money. Or to the question that was asked earlier, he thinks that his labor is being taken advantage of. Well, then go be self-employed, be the best version of yourself that you can.
All right, so we're about a minute away from the 90-minute mark. So going to wrap up here. One final question. Uh, is there anything, I guess, like a particular topic, near and dear to your heart that we haven't touched on yet?
I'm a huge fan of The Office. So The Office is probably the best television show that has been written in easily television history. It stands up. Even now, we are just about 70 years removed from the last episode, and what's actually great about The Office is as you watch The Office in the years in the future, the jokes get funnier based on whatever's happening in the world. So I think what's great is that as you watch The Office, you kind of get to watch it in a new light every single time. So I'm currently going through, I think this is like I'm not exaggerating, the 23rd time watching through The Office. It's a problem, but it's a good problem to have. I'm a huge fan. I have two cats. Their names are Mose and Astrid. So for anybody who's Office fans, that will ring true. But yeah, The Office, easily the best television show in American history.
And if The Office teaches us anything, it's that we should not trust cat lovers.
Hey now.
All right, so thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. Guys, this has been Brian Nichols, host of The Brian Nichols Show, associate editor at the Libertarian Republic. And your show, is it just thebriannicholsshow.com?
Yeah, so it's briannicholsshow.com. You can go ahead and follow me over on social media. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, and minds.com. If you guys haven't seen minds.com yet, it's a great site. So I can be found B Nichols Liberty over there. And then my email address, it's Brian at briannicholsshow.com. Yeah, I gotta make sure I get that right. Brian at briannicholsshow.com. And guys, I just wanted to say this has been number one, an absolutely fantastic conversation. Yes, there was a couple of snarky conversations but I think it's good for us to be able to have these kind of conversations, figure out where we agree, where we disagree. And here I'm sending some cat pics. So these are two kittens that we had. My wife and I, we fostered two kittens this past quarantine. So these were two kittens we had. So yeah, there you go. See, even though we disagreed on politics, we can agree on cats and kittens being adorable.
All right. Well, thanks again for coming on. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much. I'd love to come back on in the future. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah. I definitely love to do that again.
For sure. Thanks, guys.